Hello, everyone. Today I had the pleasure of speaking to Elizabeth Fracalossi. She's an evidential medium and psychic, and her work is all about bridging the gap between this world and the next. She's a founder of Spirit Bridge, LLC, and she's known for her clear and compassionate style of reading, bringing through evidence and messages that validate the presence of loved ones in spirit, and more importantly, that bring real healing and peace. Through private readings, online readings, and events, she's helped countless people experience the reality of life after death and the continuation of consciousness. Thank you so much for being here with me today, Elizabeth. I'm really excited to speak with you. I have a question to start off.
Thank you,
Every,
Joe.
absolutely. Every medium has a beginning. So go back to that moment. I want to know, when did you discover your gifts and what did that early journey look like?
Well, I knew something was different. Um, I saw people that weren't there, intuition. Um, I thought it was dreaming. Apparently later on I found out it was astral traveling, where I was floating out of my body and being above the trees in Brooklyn, New York, traveling around and seeing places from above. Um, it's kind of sketchy. I had an interesting childhood, so my memory isn't doesn't serve me as well in some ways, but I do know those moments. And as I got older, because you can't talk to people about, I couldn't talk to people about that. Um, I it sort of faded away, but the intuition was still there. Um, So it wasn't until many years later that um, I, I I just thought it was my imagination. I did see a lot of spirit, but mostly animals. Are they there? Are they not there? And what really started it was in a group that I was in, a woman's circle, so to speak, for something completely different than mediumship or anything. Um, and I saw uh, subjectively a raccoon come in through, and there was a torchère. We were all sitting in a circle on the floor. There was a torchère next to the person who was leading the group, and the animal just looked at me. So whether or not this was truly animal or not, or my brain, my consciousness trying to make sense of what was going on, just looked at me and then went to push the torchère
Hmm.
over. And I yelled out the person's name. I said, "Watch out, the lamp's going over," before it even started. And
Wow.
then, they all looked at me, all the ladies looked at me, they looked at the person who was leading the group, and then the lamp started to go over. And boy, did that did silence fall over the place. Luckily, the leader, well, the person of that group, had said, "You saw something." And I said, "Yeah." She said, "I see things too." And then she mentioned a spiritualist church. She said, "You might be interested in going there." So I did. And that started my journey of not only finding a home, but a place where there were people like me, um, where it's like they understood and you're not crazy. And that started the journey from there and knocked me over with a feather that I am here now, 20 years later, uh, doing this sort of thing, having become a minister in the spiritualist church. And it's it's just been an amazing, amazing journey, because truly it is beyond just being able to do readings and just being able to do platform and all that. That's the amazing thing. But I've fallen in with some fantastic people who, not fallen in, but mediums who have been doing it for years, who have taken the idea of mediumship and made that how to live every day as a medium. It's not just
Mhm.
about it's wonderful to be able to bring comfort to someone who is in grief, or bring
Mhm.
insight and healing to someone who's come for the intuitive, the psychic. But
Yeah.
to really be that as an everyday is just fantastic. Going beyond that is just an amazing, amazing way to be able to live.
I love that. I'm curious. I want to get more into the spiritualist church, but
Okay.
also I want to go back to your earlier story too. You spoke about kind of shutting this off. I'm curious, like what age you were when you was it out of fear, and what age were you when you started to kind
Oh,
of shut
absolutely.
down?
I think there's a lot of fear involved in this because of the way we're socialized. And,
Hmm.
there's spooky stories, your kid afraid of the dark. Without going into too much detail, it was a little bit of a rough go with domestic violence going on, a little psychological intimidation, that sort of thing.
Sure.
Unfortunately, a tale as old as time for a lot of people.
Hmm.
Um, and that creates fear. And then, so of course, anything that might seem other than, especially if your voice as a child is shuttered, is if you're told, you know, what you have to say, what you have to do, your freedom is taken away, your imagination is shut down as anything viable. And since mediumship lives in the imaginal within our consciousness, because it's our brains making sense of what we're experiencing with the other consciousness,
Hmm.
um, you get swatted down pretty quick,
Yeah,
figuratively and
absolutely.
literally. So yeah, there was fear in some of my experiences. I realize
Mhm.
now that appearances of what is spirit, um, which scared the living Jesus
Hmm.
out of me when I was a teenager, was actually, now I realize, my grandfather, who had passed when I was very young, really watching over me, because he did appear when things were particularly, when my back was particularly up against the wall, when it came to
Hmm.
family stuff. And even though I didn't understand it, and there just was a sense of peace around it, it still frightened me.
Yeah, that's understandable.
Yeah.
So years later, you find a spiritualist church and you have all these like-minded people. I want to hear
Yes.
what a service sounds like. What do you guys do?
Okay. I just want to start with that I have moved on from that particular institution, only
Sure.
because things change, leaderships change, and no aspersions on the present leadership of what's going on, but it took a direction that I personally didn't feel comfortable with. So
Hmm.
I'm not going to mention the name of the institution, because I'm not here to cast aspersions on anybody with that. But for me, when I started out, and what seemed to be the mission was very different from my Christian upbringing. I was Anglican, started Anglican Protestant, what would some people would know as the Church of England. Um, and I had left that because my daughter, very young, when she heard you were born wrong, kind of thing, that you have to pay. And my daughter looked at me and she said, "There's nothing wrong with me. What are we doing here?" And I never went back. So when I was direct, that lady who was in charge of that circle, that it wasn't a mediumship circle, it was something else. That lady who was leader and said, "Go to this place," and I found my people. Um, it was very refreshing to find principles, as opposed to, "You must do this, you have to do it this way, this is
Hmm.
how you have to believe in God, you have to believe in God." And here's a place that had seven principles that just outlined, this is what we feel is guideposts.
Hmm.
And it's up to you to decide if you want to follow them or not. It's up to you to sit with them and absorb them as you understand it,
Right.
and move into the understanding I had. I always felt that there was God of some sort for me,
Hmm.
but I didn't understand it. And I did not, and within the Christian mythos, I sort of got it, but it's like, okay, this is old. This is the analogy. It's only, it was just too confusing for me. Not that I had any terrible problems with the church. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the rituals and the traditions, but it just didn't quite fit. So finding a place where I could find a path to the divine, God of my understanding, that and create relationship, not that God is all the way up there and I'm looking at, oh goodness, there's God, that the spark of the divine, that the divine is within me and without, as above as below, within, without, that I am part of. It is that separate yet part of me in my understanding. I'm busy talking about it, and somebody might be listening to this saying, oh, is that the way? No, it's not necessarily the way. It's how I'm understanding my communion with the divine, with the
Mhm.
God of my understanding, within the stories that maybe I grew up with or I now commune with also. Um, our understanding of the world, it's such a rich, amazing place. Also, the connection with nature. Spiritualism is a connection with nature.
Mhm.
Uh, uh, Nature, light, truth. The light being the divine, and nature. Nature is so very important, because we are nature. We are part of it, uh, and that connection is encouraged. You know, that
Yeah.
saying is like, touch grass, go touch some grass. Absolutely, I recommend it highly. If you're going to touch grass, touch a tree, go outside, look at the leaves, watch a squirrel. It really does improve our being. You
Yeah.
know, it's something that I've always felt the connection to anyway. So here's that encouragement. And also the attraction is that whatever we do as humans is the connection with God, with the divine, with what we've been given, our brains, our ability. So what we create as humans, science,
Mhm.
science is good. And I know this skates on the thin ice of political in this day and age. I'm in the United States. There's some interesting thoughts about science, but within the spiritualist tradition, that science, if it can move humanity forward, if it is humanist, if it can move humanity forward, if you save lives, if it makes life better, if it brings us to a point where we can be in health and live our lives in a productive way. Um, one of my I consider leader, mentor, teachers. I'm going to mention their names: Brian Robertson, Simon James, because a lot of the concepts, a lot of what I'm going to speak of, come down through the spiritualist tradition through them because I spend a lot of time with them. But that's not excluding others who are part of the spiritualist tradition. That with what spiritualism is, if we boil it down to one thing, is what is spiritualism? Is we serve ourselves, we serve others. If there's a purpose, why are we on this planet? Is we serve. And it's so beautiful and it's so simple.
I love
And
that.
so that to me is spiritual. That to me is where spiritualism is, and knocked me over with a feather when I had decided to become a minister to serve, because it's not just about the mediumship, it's about the inspired speaking
Mhm.
that happens where you're inspired by spirit to speak. I know people come for the mediumship at the end of the service or part of the service. It's part of serving because that does create healing. And that's what people on the outside are most fascinated with. But for me, it's those words, because you just don't know who you're going to touch. And you just don't know sometimes what may come out within whatever you may have planned. And that to me is the jewel of the crown in the service. Also, the healing, spiritual healing, which is always in the spiritualist tradition, never in place of medical intervention, because we
Yep.
believe in science. It's always good. you know, if you need your appendix out, go do that.
Yes.
They have proved, even science has proved that prayer, um, they've done the experiments with the blood and showing that the white blood cells, red blood cells respond to prayer. Spiritual healing is different. It's allowing through your mediumship or through self to allow spirit to work, to allow the other to work. And I don't know how it works, but I've seen miracles. I've I've experienced the feeling myself. So I'll take it. I'll take what I can get. It's never in
Mhm.
place of. It is part of the, spiritual, physical, um, emotional. I've got that three-legged stool. My spiritual life is very full. Being a medium and having had the privilege of serving as minister.
That's absolutely beautiful. So I want to get into mediumship's role in the grieving process and how you've seen it help people heal and kind of the nitty-gritty of that, because knowing that your loved ones still exist beyond the veil is one thing to believe, but then to get evidential proof through a mediumship reading to help with the grieving process can be really, it can really fast track a lot for people. So can we dive into that?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. When we start out learning, uh, it's about evidence, evidence, evidence. It's like we've got to get that evidence, we've got to get that evidence. And saying evidential medium sounds wonderful. And it is. We want that evidence because that person has that experience
Mhm.
of, oh, how could this person have known that my great Aunt Tilly got bit by a zebra? You know, if something
Yeah.
like that comes through, I don't mean to be specious about it, but you know, but it's not just a string of, well, she got bit by a zebra and she served in World War II, and she liked baking cookies. That all sounds very good, but she didn't come all the way back, so to speak. But the world of spirits around us, vibration, they have to work so hard to blend with us as we blend with them. There's theory that they have to work harder than we do. There's all sorts of things we're never going to know till we become a message ourselves. But it's the creation of the story. It's the stories. um, they don't utilize the medium to come all the way back just to say, I used to fix cars, but
Mhm.
it's the stories of the connection of the heart. Remember when I, started fixing the car and the oil spurted in my face and I walked into the living room and dripped all over the place. And, the story unfolds and the connection of that love. I mean, it's almost trite to say that, but that love that never dies. That love that never dies. Not to say that there are people who don't want to hear from certain people in spirit, but when they come back for that connection, because it brings the person here peace, that they're okay, that they're there, that they're waiting, and they're free. And there can be a danger in that because there are people who medium shop, because they go to a medium this week and another one that next month and another one next month. So we have to be very, very aware of how we handle our recipients, our sitters, as it's known within the nomenclature within our world, so to speak. That we have to be very careful with them and help them through the grieving process. As I said, I mentioned my teachers before. They're very, very uh, big on making sure that we as mediums, that to to understand the grief process, to understand how to handle people in grief, and are very big on, have we taken care of our own grief? Have we
Yeah.
taken care of our own grief before we serve? Because our brains, I told you my childhood was interesting, and I have to make sure that that's out of the way, so I don't bring through something, and just because that's my childhood, that it's like, oh yeah, your childhood was the same way. We
Mhm.
have to be very, very careful to move ourselves out of the way and to bring ourselves into balance. So, as mediums, it's very important we take care of ourselves and understand what our stuff is about. so we can walk in balance as mediums. I think I wandered off the path of what you
No,
asked, but
no, it's a good segue
so
because it's a good segue because if you are down in the dumps and try and read somebody, you're not 100%. You know, that
no,
whole low vibration, got to be high frequency. It's all about your mood and your state of mind. It's so important.
it certainly is. It certainly is. So there's a lot of work one must do on oneself when you travel this path.
Mhm.
Um, that's why if mediums can avail, if they've got stuff and they can avail themselves of a good therapist to work out any stuff,
Mhm.
I would highly recommend it. In this day and age, there are still people who kind of sneer at that sort of thing, which I think is ridiculous. I think um, uh, good mental health or working towards good mental health, because you are literally disassociating to blend with spirit, to blend with other. And in the long run, if you're not taking care of yourself, that that can send you into bad places.
Yeah.
So to do this work, you really have to keep your mental hygiene in the forefront.
The same thing goes for people that are actually intentionally trying to astral project
Oh,
your
for
state,
any any medium,
yeah.
any mediumistic practice,
Mhm.
absolutely. Anything
Mhm.
that you're doing, you have to, if you're because you're
Yeah.
disassociating, and that can be dangerous. That's why, as I do have my own little circle, that if you're going to facilitate, you can't teach mediumship. Not everybody can learn this. Not everybody has the capacity or the ability. I know that goes against, everybody can do this. No,
There's a spectrum.
um, there's a spectrum, right? Exactly. Thank you. There's a spectrum. And if you've got someone, you have to be aware enough that if you've got someone who is not, you don't want to send somebody into schizophrenia. You don't
Yeah.
want to, there's an unfortunate trend nowadays because it's become TV and all that other stuff. And there's nothing wrong with that. If you want to be a TV medium, that's fine. You're doing good work. You're doing good work. It's just that now with everybody's like, oh, this can be a career, and it's like, oh, and through the teaching, and I'm sorry, it's bums in seats, um, but you have to take care of those students, and there are some people out there who are not doing that, and it's horrifying. It's just
Mhm.
horrifying. Or they're just offering you, 6 weeks you can have, beginner, 6 weeks intermediate, 6 weeks advanced, and you too can become a medium. But when I started out, I was told, whether or not we actually let you do this. Janet No Havoc, who was the uh, Reverend No Havoc of, I'm going to mention the Journey Within. When as I said, things have changed. She's no longer with us, and that's fine. The direction it took is the direction it took. So no aspersions. Um, she told us it's going to take. If you want to do this, it takes 6 to 7 years, and only if I say you're ready. Only if I say you're ready. There are people who take a week and they go out there and they hang out their shingle and they're doing damage,
Mm.
you know, or they come for these classes. There's also Arthur Finley in the UK, where there are people who have been practicing, 20, 30 years from the very beginning of things, and they have people showing up and saying, okay, how do I set up my business? And they haven't even started the class yet. Um, so yeah, I'm wandering off the path. There's so many things that I'm passionate about,
Mhm.
because it is about the health, because you can do damage to your recipient as well as
Yeah.
yourself. And
Yeah.
that's it's kind of horrifying where it's going. Because
Mhm.
everybody's, everything's online, and come to me, or it sounds trite to say, it's ego. We all have ego. The ego of don't look at me, or the ego of look at me, you know, and it's constantly looking at that. Like, why am I doing this? What's the point? Am I trying to make a mint or am I trying to serve? And there's nothing wrong with making a living. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not, if someone's making $1 million off of this as opposed to, they make 500 for the year or something, it's, there's no judgment there. It's like you work to the level that you need to work, but you definitely have to work within your integrity.
Hmm.
Yeah, okay, I'm on my soapbox.
No, that's great because ego is such a big part of not bringing it into readings. Like as part of my opening prayer, I asked my ego to step aside, and I think that intention is so important.
Low
Um,
intentions are always very.
yeah. So speaking of ego and these charlatans that are doing TikTok live readings and all this, how do we separate the good ones from the bad ones? And yeah, that's this new era of technology. And
Yes, and there are people who have the talent. Again, I'm utilizing words that to say it's a talent as opposed to a gift. It makes it sound like God bestowed. No, you're just born that way. It's a Lady Gaga. You're just born that way. And again, I take that, I mention their names because I am repeating their work. Brian Robertson, Simon James. They're very balanced. And I've become a part of their sanctuary. That there are people who have the talent, but don't even know where to go. I did not know that church or spiritualism existed until somebody told me. I
Mhm.
wish I'd known sooner that where are the places where we are, where the people who are attracted to that are. Not everybody who becomes a spiritualist is necessarily a medium. You don't have to be a medium to be part of that, and you don't have to be a spiritualist to be a medium. Um, so there are people who have talent, but then are just playing with it raw, so to speak. So their intentions might be good, but could be causing problems. Or there are people who do practice and then use it like, okay, where's the money?
Mhm.
Or where's the ego? And it's because they're human. They
Right.
don't know. You don't know. You don't know. So how do we tell the difference? Um, if you're a layperson who doesn't know anything about that, that can be very difficult and harm can be done, unfortunately. But if someone's listening to this, um, it would be best not to go to a medium if your person has just passed, to give it some time because you're in such deep grief. That's not to say that they wouldn't come through,
Mhm.
but you need to grieve. You need to grieve and to grieve in your own way and to give it some time. I would say at minimum, because there are some people champ at the bit for this, at least 6 months, maybe three. Just give it some time from the event. Allow the grief to be. Grieve well. Join a grief group.
Mhm.
Find what you need to do that. Give it some space. And then just like anything else, you could medium shop. It would be starting with institutions that have good reputation, spiritualist churches. And again, there are mediums who are not spiritualists who are still very good mediums as well. So it would be reputation. It would be what precedes them. Um, most of it is word of mouth, a type of thing. And then understanding that mediums are human. You could go to a medium who has an excellent reputation and maybe not such a have such a good reading. I tell my students some days are diamonds and some days are granite, because
Yeah.
we are the instrument. We are the instrument. I started out, I got a long story, but I was an opera singer at one point. And being the instrument, my voice teacher said to me, sometimes, if you've got a little, you can sing with a cold, but you can't sing with pharyngitis. So the same thing with a medium. If you're under the weather, if you're feeling a little growly, grumpy, if you're this, that, and the other thing, if your health isn't good, if you've just had an argument, all those things can put, the moon. I remember they say, "Oh, watch the moon because that can affect you as well." Well, of course, the moon affects the entire planet. It would affect me. I know that I do my best readings on that waxing moon, the waxing and just waning of my best readings. New moon, not so much. I really have to, sometimes there's a little flop sweat going on, trying to get that to really open up. Not to say that it doesn't, and not to
Hmm.
say that I haven't, people being satisfied with their readings or feeling like they've um, that there's been healing or insight. But
Hmm.
those are the things that we have to pay attention to. And
Yeah.
and as a recipient, the more something like what you're doing, more that we can get the word out there about that, you might have to do a little shopping. And just because a medium charges you $2,000 for a reading doesn't mean you wouldn't get as stellar or maybe even a more in-depth reading with a medium who might charge 50.
Hmm.
If you're being charged at all, sometimes if you make friends with a medium, you can get readings. I give away, and it's not to make me look good, but it's just that you end up giving away a lot also, because it's that balance of how you serve. It's that balance
Yeah.
of how you serve. So it's you have to do the shopping around. It's the story. It's also the compassion of the medium towards the recipient as well.
Hmm.
Or and also as a medium being able to handle your recipient, because there are people, I've had readings where I've done these beautiful readings, and in the end they said, "I told my mom you're gonna, that you were gonna mention my dolly that I lost when I was 4 years old," and it doesn't come up with the reading. And the recipients, because they don't understand what mediumship is about, will throw out an entire reading based on that. Because
Right.
I told my mom, they don't understand. We dance to their tune. They don't dance to ours. They come to speak. And why are you trying to control spirit?
Yeah.
But that's the problem with grief, is we want our control back. We've lost control. We've lost someone we've loved deeply. So becoming a medium isn't necessarily for the faint of heart.
Yeah.
In that respect, you're playing with people's emotions. You've got to be careful. You're not playing with them. That was the wrong word. I apologize for that. I'm casting aspersions on myself. We're not. You could, if you don't train well, if your intentions aren't set, if you don't put the work into yourself,
Hmm.
you can't just do this and then go about your day.
Right.
You have to, again, my teachers, you have to live as the everyday medium. I'm using their words, and I have to give credit where credit is due, because it is what we do is not from 1848, just from the Fox sisters, when that's modern spiritualism. But as I said, it's 3,000 years old. It's 5,000 years old. As long as there's been humans, there's been mediumship.
Right.
Yeah.
How does information come through for you? Um, I've talked about the clairs on my channel.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, for those that don't know, it's your senses, and then it's the psychic side of those senses that allow you to get information. So I'm curious how that comes in for you.
Oh, well, I started out what is, I just like to say I'm beyond the clairs, uh, because that's a system, because we have to have our mechanical systems to start, and then we let them go.
Mhm.
So and that's not, I'm not being snooty when I say I'm beyond the clairs. It's like I don't think of them, but we have to start somewhere. And I started claircognizant, where I just knew, which kind of feels like you're falling off a 50-foot diving board backwards into an empty pool, because it just comes and you're saying stuff and you're like, where did that come from? Especially when you're starting out, you're going, what? And the person's like, yes, I understand that. You're going, you okay? Um, so that's how I started out. And then by having, thankfully, knock on wood, I had excellent teachers who facilitated the opening up of my mediumship. As I said, Janet No Havoc is where I started. God rest her soul. She's in spirit at this point in time. I'm so lucky to have known her. And she brought through many of the wonderful teachers from Arthur Finley came to the United States through her church. And so I had great training where you practice those things. So the hearing came next for me, the clairaudient. I could hear. But again, it's your brain making sense of the signals or what you're given. So I think I hear, subjective. And then the seeing, the knowing, and the colors and everything else. And now it all just comes at once. I don't even think about it. I'm like, he's telling me, I'm seeing, I know. The words just come. And that's why it takes 6 or 7 years to be able to be within the training of the nomenclature so it makes sense so you can string through the story. Because once you've established who it is, then they've come all this way to say, I see you. I see this is happening in your life. This is what I want you to do. This is what, well, they don't want you to do anything. You have free will. This is what I see. This is what I suggest. I know you. I'm with you. And every single one that comes through wants them to live life, to keep going, to live. It's just amazing. But to be seen is so important for everyone, and to be seen by your loved one in spirit, to be seen again. Um, so yeah, I've wandered off the clairs. So it is the embodiment. It is, as Janet used to say, the light. It's like you're wearing them like a light coat. You can feel who they are, their heartbeat, their their the physicality of their body, their their gestures, their motions. So it's not just the seeing; it's the feel, it's and the feeling. Um, but I know this is stuff you may be. Some people might be in the process of learning that if you're doing mediumship, pay attention to what your hands are doing, paying attention to what your body's doing, notice it. Um, because I remember one of the first times I was going like this, and I didn't realize, and then I finally realized I was doing this. And do you understand why I'm doing this? And the recipient said yes. And then as the reading came through, it turned out that that was something that that person in spirit would do to stim because they were autistic, and it became an important piece of evidence. I've been able to, when you think it's like spectacular, how can you bring through someone who is nonverbal? Because there's so many more ways that we communicate with our bodies, and that the memories, you can describe the memories of someone nonverbal. Like I remember when you read me the story, things like that. So it's it's so much more subtle. We start out learning that stuff, and then we let it go so we can go into the levels and layers. It's just an amazing, as you know, it is such an amazing experience and such a privilege to and you know and I'm sure you've woken up and it's like, really, me, what is this going to work today? This is still happening. It's just so amazing to be part of that, the world within worlds.
Yeah. That brings me to time. How do you view time here, time on the other side? Is it everything happening all at once? What do you think of time?
um Time, that's a very interesting question. How do I view time? I can say, since becoming a medium, um fear of fear of dying has fallen away from me. And so whatever time I have is the time I have. And how I view time is make the most of it. But that doesn't mean that if you're just sitting there not vacuuming your living room, that you're lazy and that you're wasting time. I think time is precious. And if you're just going to go frolic in the woods, I think that's better than vacuuming. But that's my opinion. Um, so we have to make the most of time here. Um, Time, I feel, and I can't prove it, that time definitely does not. Time is a human construction. It's something that we've constructed. So I believe within the world of spirit that time does not pass the way we think. I love this existential question, this question of philosophy. So there are people who say spirit ages on the other side. We don't know. We don't know. But we can say they've been there for a long time, because every human who has ever existed is now part of the realm of spirit. But we don't know who they are. We don't come through because we have no connection to. Um, so are they still in spirit? Do they move on? Is there something else beyond that? We won't know. So how I view time, time is a construct. I started out, I love this opera career. I did start out, I was a New York City police officer for a while. So time was very, you had to be on time. And if I may, I was one of those who was like, I was there for the underdog type of thing. I was what was known as a straight arrow. I know being a police officer today, it's the profession is looked at in kind of askance. I don't blame people, and it is very fraught. But I did try to serve the service. So when it's time, you got to be there. If you're early, you're on time. If you're on time, you're late, and if you're late, don't even bother. So my sense of time has been constructed by these parameters, these constructions, and I've had to, how do we live in this world, in the real world, and how do we blend with the next? um, there's a practice for mediums sitting in the presence, which is becoming the observer, where we try to let go, which is emptying our minds, which keeps us in that place of. And if you do anything, if you're practicing mediumship, if the one thing that you do is sit in the presence, just become the observer, allow thoughts, feelings, and things to come and go, and just to sit there. And within that, time can sometimes, don't sit for a long time, maybe 15, 20 minutes. But within that time, it feels like forever, or it can feel like, you know, 5 minutes have gone by and then it's like, oh, you're already coming out of it. So that's when we move into that place. That's where time gets a little sketchy.
Hmm.
Um, that that's going to be for the philosophers to continue to discuss.
Yeah, I was just curious if you had any like cases of prophetic dreams or déjà vus,
Oh yeah,
synchronicities. It
oh, yeah.
that kind of put time as kind of a malleable, weird thing rather than a straight line.
Oh yes, when I was younger, that's going back to that just jogged my memory. When I was a child, when I was a kid, there were many times where I saw things that were going to happen, and when they happened, I was in it thinking this happened, or just going back to, oh goodness, um, it served me when I was a police officer. I have to say that it was rookie when we came up to it was an apartment building. We had, someone was unfortunately threatening to off themselves. We came to it was an emergency exception. We were trying to get the door open. And I said to my boss as a rookie, he's not in there. He's not in there. He's gone. He's left. He's not in there. And, wow, I'm being a female cop back in the late 80s. you know, um, and sure enough, they got the door open. They got the manager the key. He wasn't in there. He's like, how did you know that? And somebody else said, I can't remember who, if it was another police officer or somebody who happened to be there at the door, said, oh, yeah, you guys have a lot of good intuition. Intuition. So that's where my intuition served. And I do have to say that people who get into the emergency services, or people like nurses, doctors, people who are in the service type of, that there is an aspect of mediumship, there's an aspect of intuition that comes into what they do. Not everybody, But some of the I've actually seen it with a doctor, someone who worked on my husband. When he came around, I could feel he was in that zone. Mediums go into the zone when time doesn't mean something. So yes, and during readings as well. If I don't set that clock, or if I don't have the clock in front of me, I could just go on, and it could be 2 hours later.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I know I'm talking all over the place with this,
No,
but you're
this is great.
asking such wonderful questions. Thank you.
Absolutely. I want to ask a little bit of a different question. What is your experience with spirit guides? Because you
Mm.
read books, we each have one, we might have three, we might have six. They come and go, and you hear all this stuff, but I've only ever tried to connect to mine once, and I did get a name and kind of what they looked like, but besides that, I'd never really get anything. So, two questions. Maybe your
Yeah.
experience with spirit guides, and also maybe if you can sense anything around me, if possible.
Okay. So I'm going to start out with, if a medium tells you this is your guide, his name is Aloysius, and he lived in 1856 in San Francisco, run for the hills. No evidence. There's no
Right.
evidence. There's no evidence. We can't know. So somebody could put a thought form into your head. So I'm going to start with that, and then I'm going to back up.
Mhm.
And I'm going to be honest. I started out because one of my first teachers was into, you had your joy guide and your doctor guide and this, that, and the other thing, and a guide guide. And I'm like, oh, guides, the guides. And we did guide work and all this other stuff. And it didn't sit with me because I couldn't, like you, it's like, I can't, what's going on here? Um, and this may be controversial because there are people who, have their guides, know their guides, research their guides. So I'm not saying that spirit wasn't with them that gave them this information. So, but it is up to the individual medium to make these decisions. I'm going to caveat that with that. That being said, if someone is looking for a guide, and especially if it's like find your joy guide or whatever, how do you know as the medium that you're actually with this person and that you haven't intuitively created or known something or read something, and this is just you as opposed to actual spirit? So now you're creating this thought form. So I am of the camp. I am of the camp because there are people out there who's going to be listening to me going, no, that's not, this is my experience. And again, it is an individual experience. So and especially as a spiritualist, you have to make your decisions. But my camp is that yes, we do have spirit that help us. I do believe that there is spirit that assist, but I'm of the camp that they're assisting. I can be aware of their presence, but I'm not talking directly to them. I'm letting them do their thing. If they decide to say something to me or make me feel a thing or have me see a thing, I let that happen. If I'm doing my mediumship or whatever, I don't call them in. I'm not like, how many are you? I do have the sense sometimes there's like a few or one or whatever, but I try not to, I'm not sitting there like, who are you? What's your name? When did you live? All that other stuff. I did at one point and I got some interesting things that I looked up and said, oh, but then that person just moved on. I believe that we do have, maybe there's those people in spirit who are with you or higher beings. I don't know. Again, I can't prove higher beings or not, that are with you throughout your life, or they change. I think it depends on the person. So if you do have, I've got a guide and this guide does this and this is the guide's name and this, that, if you keep thinking about that, you might be creating a thought form. And now and again, through the people that have taught me, and I believe taught me well, and I take this on and I bring that to my students as well. If you really think about that guide, I've got this guide here. Now I'm trying to do my mediumship, but now I have to go through the guide. And how do you know that you haven't created the thought form? And now you're creating an extra step for yourself move through that, you're working harder, not smarter, you know? So
Mhm.
how do you know you haven't created that for yourself for sure? That you now have to move through that to now deal with spirit. And I'm just using spirit isn't here, spirit isn't there. It's they're all around us. The world is here. It's not somewhere else. So I'm of the camp that we do have those people who come through, especially if you're doing trance work or you have what's known as a control, or the communicator that you normally work with, that comes through on a consistent basis. Those mediums who have worked years, and I'm talking years. It doesn't happen in a few weeks or a few years, years working with trance mediumship. That same spirit comes through. It's a
Mhm.
whole entirely different thing. And they're not there to guide. They're there, and trance has to be witnessed. So don't do that alone, folks. All right. There's no purpose for it if it's not being witnessed. So anyway, those are my thoughts about the guide. So you're busy chasing something or trying, and you don't know if it's your creation or not. So you're working harder and smarter. Again, there are people who might be listening to this screaming at me saying, no, I have 8 guides and these are their names and all of that. And I am not here to tell you you're wrong. And I'm not here to tell you that that's not how you should be working. You work within your comfortability. And if that's how you've been working and successfully for 25 years, then that's how you work. But as a spiritualist and as a medium, how do we move mediumship and spiritualism, or the idea of what we do? How do we move forward with this? So I am of the camp where I do have them. They're there. I know they guide me. I know when the chips are down. I've had experiences where they've stepped in, but I'm not trying to sit here figuring out who they are, where they came from, if they're a higher being or not, what their purpose is. I, I'm working on just allowing loved ones to come through. I can sit for spirit and say, "Hey, you got something for me? I need a little guidance. That would be nice." Um, and also, I warn people: don't get addicted. Don't sit every day. What should I be doing today? What's my next step? What's my no, 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 no. You got free will.
Yeah.
You have free will, folks. So I hope that's helpful to you, and I don't want to
Mhm.
discourage you if you have an interesting person who comes in and says, "Oh yeah, I want to tell you about myself." I've done inspirational writing where I had someone come in and I just started writing and I found them, and then they went away. But I have all this writing, but I can't prove anything short of I knew that they existed, and that was just an experience that I had.
The only reason I really gave it any attention was because I had heard that same name about a week later on the TV, and it was like a weird name. And it
Mm-hmm.
was kind of like a validation of sorts. And I'm like, huh, it's kind of weird.
Yeah,
But then, as you said, they're gone. So I didn't really,
they're gone. Make him back. It's a validation. It might be that the purpose was to validate your experience as a medium.
right. Yeah.
That this is
Good
what you
point.
experience. Sometimes spirit wants to be heard. I had when I before the pandemic, when I had an office, um, I had this one gentleman come in all the time, and I knew I can't prove this. I drew him. I knew he was a firefighter. I knew he was a volunteer firefighter. I knew he would tell me, I'd come and I'd write down stuff and whatnot. And I always thought that whoever he was for would come in, and that person never showed up. So for whatever reason, this spirit wanted to have voice with me. And maybe one of these years, their person might come to me and I'll have this information, because he was there strongly with me for a number of times. But just come in. And I'm like, hello, you're here again. And then that was it. We have these odd experiences that are out of the realm of the formality of our training, and their experiences, and we can't prove them. And you used a wonderful word, weird. We're always described as weird. Weird, the definition is wild and supernatural. And who wouldn't want to be wild and supernatural? Unless you're very conservative. There are some mediums who aren't wild and supernatural. They're just, you know, here we go. that sort of thing. But that's what weird means, wild and supernatural. And it is. And it's an experience. And it's ours. And we can't prove it. And it's amazing. So I'm sure you journal, you write this stuff down. So anybody listening to this, just write it down. Your dream time, your experiences, they're for you. They're amazing. We wish they could happen every day, but they happen few and far between, but they happen.
They do. You just got to be aware and
Yep.
ask
There's
and set that
awareness.
intention.
Yes, we can ask. We absolutely can. We
Yeah.
absolutely can. You can ask for signs. Sometimes when we need it, you can just say, okay, show me a daisy in the middle of winter. And then all of a sudden you get a daisy or somebody's name is Daisy or something, and you get a daisy in the middle of winter because
Hmm.
it's your need. And then the more we do this, the more that need kind of falls away because we just know.
Right.
We know they're there.
How has this work really changed you, your worldview, your relationships with people, how you navigate the world?
Well, I've always tried to lead with kindness. I suppose it was my upbringing. This you could go in so many different directions, having a little bit of a violent beginning. Um, I wanted to lead with kindness. I wanted to serve. I wanted to, but there was also a part of me, and I will admit this, there was a part of me that wanted to be special and different because I was told otherwise. Becoming a medium, I will admit this. Oh, this is special, this is different, this is amazing, this is magical. But I learned very quickly that that can't be the attitude. So it brought me the balance. I learned the balance. Therapy, everything else. I suppose it was what I was always seeking, to be of service. Can't we be kind? Can't we be of service? Not to say that because you're a medium, you're kind. There are some mediums out there that are pieces of work, just as much
Mhm.
as there's some who are wonderful, and you strive to be like them. But my worldview is if we could be within our own nature, becoming a medium means you have to go do the work within. And so many people are running away from themselves and they don't like themselves and they don't realize it. It's a very outward way of being, chasing money, chasing. There's nothing wrong with being a millionaire or chasing money or having that stuff, but within balance. It's always about balance. So I was out of balance. I will say, even before this work, I was out of balance because of family and things like that. And it brought me into balance. But then I had to do the tough work. I um, do not speak to, I had family members who accepted this, and I have other family members who, because of an industry they worked in, threatened to shut my church down, threatened to shut my sanctuary down because they thought, well, this is charlatan. They're just taking your money. They said, I'll have it shut down in a month. Did not happen. Did not happen. Because it's legitimate in the United States 301c. It's considered a religion to protect us as mediums. But religion to me is a very heavy word when it comes to spiritualism. It's a philosophy. So there were family members I don't talk to. I have zero contact with because of their fear around this and their ideologies.
Mhm.
And there are the family that I gained, the like-minded people. And I don't have to have people of like mind to be um, to be my friend, but are within this work. And you'd be surprised the diversity within worldview, political views, et cetera, that happen within mediumship.
Mm.
People have an idea that if you become a medium, you're immediately going to be kind and wonderful and of service. And guess what? We're dealing with human beings and they're
Mhm.
fun. And I always say, they're complicated. They're
It's a
fun.
spectrum.
It's a spectrum. Yes, it's
Yeah.
definitely a bouquet of
Yeah.
some interesting flowers, plants, things.
I know. I work in a jail, so I see the best and worst of humanity, unfortunately. So,
Yes, yes. And And thank you for sharing that. That's not an easy thing to do. And I've always been of the attitude that with, I said I was a police officer, but I've always never thought of myself as judge and jury. And the more I was in the system, and again, this is my opinion, so I'm sorry if I'm throwing opinions, that why aren't we taking care of people, upholding people, bringing them balance and mental health? And I think that's why mediumship sometimes is scary for people, not because it is the other, because we see, and there are people who want to be seen, and I mean see just in the universal sense, not just the vision, but I can see you. And there are people very uncomfortable being seen because they don't feel they're any damn good, and not understanding that as a part of my belief, a part of the divine. You're not good, you're not bad, you just are, which is more of the Eastern way of thinking, but you just are. And can we go from there and move forward? And people get stuck. We're human.
Yeah.
We're human. And that's it can be hard to be a human.
Yeah. As we wrap up, Elizabeth, I have three questions for you, some rapid fires. You kind of touched upon this first one, but if you could erase one illusion that humanity keeps falling for.
Control is an illusion.
Mm.
Control,
Yeah.
you have no control. Control is an illusion. And everything's set up to control. And it's not to be able to let go and just be.
It's absolutely beautiful. Next one. What is something you used to believe that you know now, and also something you believe now that you never would have believed, say, 10, 20 years ago?
Okay. um I know that for me, that life is eternal, that consciousness is an amazing thing, and I in my experience, life is eternal, and everybody out there has to make that decision for themselves. But I believe life, I thought about it, it's like, really? But life is eternal.
Mhm.
And the thing now, that the presence of that I wouldn't have believed, um that fear is an eternal partner, or that fear is something that, the fear of the world of spirit, the fear of the jump scare, the 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 peeling away of fear for me, that I thought that I all the fears that I had, the what was drummed into my dear little ear, that through the work of this mediumship, fear the fear has fallen away. And I know that, that it's, I mean, there's, and with that fear falling away, it has opened up experiences that have absolutely touched my heart, blown my mind, and made me feel so happy to be alive because I've had that experience. Just how nature responds, which was taught to me about having nature respond to you as the medium, um, is mind blowing. And that's a whole other thing. When nature responds, whether the animals show up or the wind comes up or something. I'm not saying I'm calling up the wind. There are people who do that, I've seen it. But that, and especially those experiences through spirit, because we create that. We create. And yeah, that's that we are, again, borrowing words, that creator created us, and we create. And what we create, especially living as a medium, in the beauty,
Mhm.
the beauty, the beauty, the beauty.
Yeah.
that just to really, after, I could have been so miserable for so long, and I won't get into my past, but the beauty of living, the beauty of living, the miracle of being alive, to
Yeah.
really, really experience it to a depth I can't even explain. Yeah, 20 years ago, mm, it's great
You
to be
know, and
alive.
aside from the tree hugging and all that wonderful hippie stuff, I think people just need to realize how beautiful nature is. Just, besides the woo-woo stuff. I mean, people are
Yeah,
on their phone all the time. They don't stand in the grass with their bare feet or any of that as much anymore. It's
no,
really a shame.
yeah. It's just to, get your 10 minutes of sunlight,
Mhm.
just to breathe. Look
Yeah.
up, the birds, the things that you're missing. The It was years ago. I think since I was a kid, if I may, um, the sunlight dappling through the trees where it just sparkles has
Mhm.
always taken my breath away. It's always been like, and it still does that to me today. I experienced that this morning, with the sun coming through. And I am really, really lucky to live where I'm overlooking this beautiful view of a lake, Greenwood Lake. And so the sun coming up over the mountain across the lake, reflecting off the lake. So now the sun's coming through the trees, the reflection of the lake's coming through the trees. And I just feel like I almost feel dizzy on how I, that's it. That's it. Everything in that moment is like you experience everything at once. And it's an inexplicable feeling just having the sun come through the trees. And to be able to start looking at nature that.
I love it. My last question for you. If you could plant one seed in the human psyche and hope it could grow into something beautiful, what would it be?
Always lead with kindness.
Mhm.
Kindness.
It, it all comes back to love.
Yep, that's it.
Mhm.
Kindness. Love, kindness. That's what it is. Love has so many, as you know, has thousands of different facets. But I'm just picking kindness because that could change a lot if that seed could really, really grow. And there's so many kind people out there. There really are.
Well, Elizabeth, is there anything else you'd like to share as we wrap this up that I may have missed?
I don't think you've missed anything. I would just like to say to anybody who might be listening, if I've said something that goes like counter to what you understand or what you've been learning or what your teachers have told you, I just would like to say that I'm here to, I relayed my experience, and that to always question what I've said, question what your teachers say. And I don't mean like question like you're against it, but does this work for you? Does this sit well? Does this make sense? It is your life. You have to create your journey. And so if I've said something about guides and you're like, nope, I've got three guides and I know their names and it's like, then that's for you. I'm not against it. I'm not for it. I'm just, my experience is my experience. And that to have your experience, but to be discerning, to question, that no one mentor or teacher has the key.
Mhm.
Find the person that speaks to you. Like I'm in a circle with a particular medium that works for me to continue to unfold my mediumship. I might be out there teaching, but I'm continuing to unfold. We're never done, not until I'm a message. So thank you for letting me say that one last thing.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. It was a pleasure speaking to you. And I will link to everything at your site for people to book a reading. Obviously, you've been
Oh
doing this
goodness.
for a long time.
That's very kind. I appreciate that. If my name or my visage or this speaks to someone, then that's meant to be. And I really appreciate that generosity. Thank you so much.
Of course. All right, everyone. As she said, always question, stay sharp, and remember, we're connected to nature, we're connected to source, and we're connected to each other.
Yes,
So with that,
absolutely.
Humanfluence out.